The sink water ran cloudy with grease and soap, and I watched the swirl the way a man watches a storm roll in across an empty field. Because you know it's coming and you decide whether you'll stand there and take it or go inside and pretend you didn't hear the thunder that's already shaking your windows. Tessa was behind me pacing, rattling off the checklist of what I had supposedly failed to be this week, and the rhythm of the plates in my hands kept me from answering, because every good carpenter knows you measure twice and cut once, and words are a blade if you're careless with them. She didn't want to be careful. She wanted a show. "You make everything small," she said, voice sharp like a steak knife scraping a plate, and she walked that same lap from the doorway to the counter like a metronome for resentment that never misses its beat. "My sister's family goes to Turks and Caicos, and you're talking about tires and a dead air conditioner like that's what a real man focuses on. And I'm tired of living like we're one bad day from pawn shops and payment plans, because Chris never." I set the plate in the rack and shut off the water, and the house exhaled into the silence the way a boxer resets his feet between rounds, because there's a difference between being quiet and being done, and I was done pretending the ground wasn't shaking under our feet. I dried my hands slowly, not as a stunt, just as a man giving himself 8 seconds to choose the clean cut instead of the jagged one that bleeds forever. When I turned, Tessa already had that look that says she thinks she's landed the punch that'll end it. "I wish I had married Chris," she said, and she stretched Chris like a rubber band she wanted to snap right under my eye. Because some people don't want solutions. They want the sound their own cruelty makes when it hits a kitchen wall. "At least he's a real man." I nodded once. Small, measured, because the only way to beat a bad song is not to sing along, and I wasn't going to give her another verse to dance on. "You still can," I said, and the words came out like I was just noting the weather, even though I could feel my pulse working in my neck like a nail gun that somebody forgot to oil. "If that's the life you want, nobody's chained you here." She laughed, quick and mean, like the sound a screen door makes when you forget to hold it, and she waved her hand toward the sink and the bills and the life we actually live, because it's easy to mock a man's work when you haven't lifted a board in years. "Oh, sure," she said. "I'll just go marry Chris, because Jake the Budget King says it's okay if I trade in my bald tires for a real engine." I let the silence land, then pulled my phone from my pocket with the same steady hands I used to hang a door, because if it isn't level you live with the drag forever, and I'm too old to yank on crooked hinges. I opened the Ring app, found the clip from 5 minutes ago, her voice, her words, her agency, and tapped share. Chris still had the same number. I typed nothing. I just sent him the proof straight from my front door, and the blue bar crawled across the screen like a fuse burning toward something that deserved to blow. "You didn't," she said, because this was supposed to be theater and I had gone and invited the critic she actually feared. And there are some ghosts you only believe in when they answer the doorbell on your phone. The reply came fast, the way honest things come when they don't need a costume. "Chris, you're delusional. I'm married. Stop texting me and stop embarrassing yourself. Grow up." Another bubble followed before the first one cooled. "If you contact me or Bella again, we'll get a lawyer. Leave us alone." Tessa's face did that color drain that looks like morning after too much night, and the performance went out of her shoulders so suddenly I thought she might sit on the floor, because fantasies are helium and truth is a box cutter. She grabbed my phone like it could give her a different answer if she held it hard enough. But the words didn't change, and her mouth worked around something she couldn't swallow or spit. The unlucky fish on the deck that finally realizes the water isn't coming back. "You set me up," she said, but it didn't have heat, just the brittle sound of a plate that's already cracked and only needs a countertop to finish the job. "No," I said, and I took my phone from her with 2 fingers, careful, respectful, the same way I handle glass because I don't like sweeping and I don't like bleeding and I don't like pretending either one was a surprise. "You set the stage. I opened the curtain. That's the difference." She knocked into the hallway like the house had sloped beneath her, rattled the bathroom door, and locked it fast enough the frame protested, and then the faucet roared the way people do when they need noise to drown the arithmetic they can't escape in their own head. I turned the sink back on, rinsed the last 2 plates, and let the steady water reteach my pulse, because you can hold anger like a hot rivet if you know where to put it next, and I already knew where this one was going to live. I wiped the counter, stacked the bills, and slid the cheapest envelope to the top, because order is a kind of mercy when the rest of your life wants to go feral, and I'm not interested in feral. I'm interested in clean cuts, clean exits, and the kind of strength that looks boring until the judge asks for proof and you've got it in triplicate. On the hallway wall, the Ring camera's little blue eye blinked like a quiet witness that doesn't take sides. And I thought of all the times I bit my tongue so she could think she'd won an argument that wasn't worth the drywall. And I wondered how long good men let a house lean before they call it condemned. Her phone started buzzing behind the bathroom door. Sister first, then her mother, then finally silence that meant even they understood what a straight line looks like when the ruler's been laid across the table. I poured a glass of water and set it by the door anyway, because decency isn't something I take off when someone spits on it, and I don't need an audience for that kind of thing to count as muscle. When I lay down that night, I didn't pray for reconciliation or some Hallmark reroute where a vacation fixes what character broke. I counted what I could control, and I put the rest in a box I labeled no longer mine, because a man can carry a lot until he realizes the load isn't just heavy, it's stupid. By morning, the bathroom door would open, and the story would move from what she wants to what I'll do. And when the world tried to turn it into a circus, I planned to be the one selling tickets, keeping the ledger, and locking the gate at closing time. 3 days of silence in the house felt less like peace and more like the hum of power lines over your head. Always there, ready to spark if you reached the wrong way. Tessa had packed a bag the night after Chris's message cut her fantasy in half, and she'd slinked off to her sister Simone's place like a cat that hisses at the hand that feeds it, but still expects a saucer of milk waiting somewhere else. I didn't chase. I didn't call. I didn't ask anyone where she was, because a man learns that sometimes the strongest move is to let the rope play out until the person on the other end hangs themselves with it. By the third morning, my phone started buzzing not with apologies, but with pity texts from neighbors and coworkers. That's how I knew she'd shifted tactics. Tessa had gone public. Her Facebook post looked like a pamphlet for a battered wives' charity, complete with a black and white filter selfie where her eyes were puffy enough to suggest tears, but clear enough to show she'd posed for it twice. The caption read, "Please pray for me. Living with emotional abuse is harder than people think. Some men break you without laying a hand. Please stop asking me to smile. I'm dying inside." Hundreds of likes. Dozens of comments. Her mother, typing in all caps like it, added credibility. "Come home, sweetie, we'll protect you." Simone chiming in, "She deserves happiness, not fear." And friends I hadn't seen in years piling on with emojis and slogans. I didn't respond. I didn't post. I didn't defend myself with memes or rants, because that's what weak men do when they panic. I just scrolled, saved screenshots, and poured another coffee, because truth is patient. Truth doesn't need a hashtag. And then it came, buried in the comments like a lit match in dry grass. Bella, Chris's girlfriend, the same one Tessa had been sneaking late-night messages to while pretending I was the weight dragging her down. Bella wrote, "Funny how you forget to mention the secret texts you've been sending my fiancé. Should I post the screenshots here or just email your family?" The comments froze like a room when someone drops a glass, and within minutes, half of her supporters vanished. Deleted likes, deleted comments. Simone tried to jump in with a "don't believe lies," but Bella posted 3 screenshots. Timestamps, flirty messages, Tessa asking Chris if he still thought about their future. The thread collapsed under its own gravity. That night, I heard the front door slam, and in walked Tessa with Simone on her left and her mother trailing behind like they were staging an intervention. Simone carried her phone out like a weapon, ready to narrate. Her mother wore the look of a woman rehearsing lines for a church committee, all sanctimony and shallow breath. Tessa pointed at me the second I stood from the recliner. "You're destroying me," she said, voice trembling but not from fear, from rage at being caught. "You've been controlling, manipulative, and now you've turned people against me. My own parents don't understand what I'm going through because of you. I let them all talk because the thing about angry mobs is they burn out fast when nobody fights back." Simone read off a list of grievances like she was in a courtroom. Unpaid trips, nights I came home late, times I didn't compliment her sister's haircuts. Her mother wrung her hands about emotional neglect, and Tessa kept circling back to the word abuse, like if she said it enough it would become proof instead of performance. When they were done, I reached for the folder I'd left on the coffee table, thick with printouts. Screenshots of texts to Chris, to coworkers, to people I didn't even know. Bank statements showing her Venmo requests to friends, spinning the same victim narrative for cash. I slid them across the table one by one, Not with flourish, not with rage. Just steady as a man putting tools back in their box after a long day. Abuse, I said finally. Looks to me like the only person abused here is the one who kept footing the bills while you begged for vacations with another man. Simone went pale. Her mother blinked like she'd swallowed something wrong. Tessa grabbed the papers and ripped them, but evidence doesn't disappear just because you don't like the weight of it in your hands. You think you're clever, she spat, but the crack in her voice betrayed her. This isn't over. No, I said. Standing tall enough the room seemed smaller around me. It's just beginning, and this time you don't control the story. Proof does. They left with less noise than they arrived, and I watched from the doorway as Tessa stumbled toward Simone's car. Shoulders hunched, phone already in her hand. I knew she'd try again. Different audience, different angle, but I also knew one thing she hadn't figured out yet. The internet never forgets, and neither does a man who's done being called less than what he is. I locked the door, poured another coffee, and sat back down. I wasn't worried about her next move. I was ready for it. By the fourth week, her act was running thin. Simone had stopped posting cryptic quotes about toxic men. Her mother had gone quiet on Facebook, and the flood of sympathy had dried up like a busted well in summer. That's when Tessa did what she always does when the applause dies. She went looking for cash. I overheard it by accident. I was on the porch after work, boots unlaced, sipping a beer, when her voice carried through the thin walls of Simone's kitchen across the yard. She thought she was being discreet, but when someone's desperate, they forget the world has ears. She was on speakerphone with her father, Frank. Dad, I just need 5,000. Just until this is sorted out, she said. Her voice stretched tight, like she'd rehearsed the plea in the mirror. Jake's cut me off. I can't breathe financially. I can't even get groceries. I heard Frank sigh through the speaker, long and heavy like a man who's been here too many times before. Tessa, no. You already owe your mother and me for that car repair last year, the credit card mess before that. I'm not writing another check so you can spin the same stories. You're 30 years old. Start acting like it. Her voice cracked, but not from sorrow, from rage. You don't understand what he's done to me. Frank cut her off cold. What you've done to yourself is the problem. Don't call again about money. And the line went dead. I sat back in my chair and stared at the sky. I wasn't smug, not even satisfied, just tired. Because when a father tells his own daughter no, you know the playbook is worn out. That night, she tried a new audience. My mother. I came home from work and found Mom standing at the counter, arms crossed, listening to Tessa spin a new version of the same tired song. He's withholding funds, she said, eyes damp but dry enough to know they were fake. I've got no access, no way to survive. It's financial abuse. Mom didn't even flinch. She leaned on the counter, eyes sharp as barbed wire. You still owe me $300 from Christmas when you forgot your wallet at the mall. Don't you dare stand here and use the word abuse to cover for the way you burn through money you didn't earn. Tessa blinked, her mouth opening like she'd misheard. But Mom kept going. Jake never once came to me begging for handouts. You? I've lost count. Go back to Simone's. My sympathy ran out years ago. Tessa stomped out, heels hitting the floor like gunshots. And when she got home, she slammed the door so hard the frame rattled. She stormed into the living room where I was sorting through bills and threw her purse onto the couch. This marriage is over, she declared, chest heaving like she'd practiced the line in traffic. I'm done being treated like a prisoner. I want a divorce. Half of everything. I didn't shout, didn't flinch. I just pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, and typed divorce lawyer near me. The glow of the screen lit up her face, and she froze, not expecting me to accept so easily. You're just giving up? She stammered. I met her eyes steady. No, I'm choosing not to waste one more day begging someone to respect me. You want half? Fine. Let the lawyers handle it. We'll see how the math comes out when it's facts instead of fantasies. She sputtered, fists clenching. You can't do this to me. I'm not doing anything to you, I said, voice low even. You've done it to yourself. The room was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator kick on. She stormed into the bedroom, slammed drawers, muttered curses under her breath. But it all sounded hollow now. Later, Frank called me. Not her, me. His voice was steady, but it carried the kind of disappointment only a father can shape. She called me earlier, asked for money. I told her no. Jake, I don't know what's wrong with my daughter anymore, but I'll tell you this. You've shown more backbone tonight than she's shown in years. You'll get through this. She made her bed. I hung up and sat there in the half-dark, the phone heavy in my hand. My anger wasn't fireworks anymore. It was steel cold, forged, steady. She wanted a war. I was ready to fight it on paper, in court, in front of whoever needed to see. Because the truth was out. Her own family saw it. My family saw it. And now, so did I. The days of pretending this was salvageable were over. I folded the bills into a neat stack, slid them into the drawer, and felt a weight lift. Not because it was finished, but because I'd finally stopped carrying it alone. Tessa's talent for reinvention could have earned her a paycheck if it wasn't always used to light matches under her own life. Once her family shut the door, she went looking for an audience that didn't know her as well. Her Instagram stories lit up like a neon pity parade. Photos of her curled up on Simone's couch with captions like, "He broke me," or "No woman should suffer in silence." A carefully angled selfie with mascara streaks down her cheeks. She even went so far as to post her Venmo handle with the caption, "Trying to rebuild. Any support helps." People did send her money. Small amounts, mostly from the kind of friends who love drama more than they love truth. 10 here, 20 there. Enough to fuel the illusion. But lies are like credit cards. They let you spend now, but the bill always comes. I didn't have to wait long. A coworker called me one afternoon. "Jake," he said carefully. "Look, I don't want to get in the middle, but Tessa's been telling people at the office that you drained her accounts and left her stranded. She's been asking for loans." I asked one question. Has she mentioned the designer bags she's been buying? Silence. Then a laugh, bitter and short. "Yeah, we all noticed. She came in last week with a Louis Vuitton. Said it was a gift from Simone. But now she's asking for gas money? Doesn't add up." He wasn't the only one. Over the next few days, 2 more coworkers reached out with similar stories. They'd pitched her sob story, then spotted the new shoes, the salon hair, the receipts in her purse. It wasn't sympathy she was collecting, it was evidence. Evidence against herself. Then came Jordan. He showed up at my door on a Friday evening, hat in hand, looking like a man who'd chewed on something sour for too long. Jordan used to work with Tessa, and years ago she'd flirted with him hard enough that his wife nearly left. He carried that scar in his marriage, and it showed in the way he held his shoulders. "Jake," he said, "I need you to hear this from me. She's been telling people I chased her, that I pressured her. She's painting herself as a victim at work, and my wife's pregnant now. I can't have that poison in my house." He handed me his phone. Screenshots, saved texts, messages she'd sent late at night. Suggestive, flirty, begging him not to tell anyone. He'd ignored them after the first mistake years back. But he kept everything. Now he was giving it to me. "I don't want revenge," Jordan said. "I just need the truth out there before she burns me again." I looked through the messages, then looked him square in the eye. "You'll get the truth. I don't swing wild, Jordan. I swing clean." He nodded, relief etched deep in the lines of his face. "Good, because she's about to learn she can't play victim forever." After he left, I sat with the folder of evidence growing thicker by the day. Screenshots from Bella, bank statements, Venmo posts, now Jordan's texts. Tessa thought she was building a case against me, but all she was doing was handing me bricks for a wall she'd never climb. My anger wasn't fire anymore, it was stone. Heavy, unmoving. Something she couldn't chip with crocodile tears or hashtags. I didn't need to expose her yet. Timing mattered. A good carpenter doesn't rush the cut. He waits until the line is marked and the saw is steady. And when that moment came, she'd find out exactly what controlled anger looks like. The mediation room smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee, the kind of place where people come to posture, not to solve anything. Tessa swept in late, 10 minutes past the hour, dressed like she was about to attend a fashion show instead of a legal proceeding. Head-to-toe designer, Gucci heels, a Chanel bag perched on her arm like a trophy, diamond studs catching the fluorescent light. She didn't look broke. She looked manicured, polished, rehearsed. Her lawyer, Lawrence, trailed behind her, already sweating through his collar, clutching a folder like a man who knew he'd drawn the short straw. Across the table, my lawyer, Denise, a woman with steel eyes and a voice like gravel, sat cool and collected, tapping her pen once against the stack of papers we'd prepared. The mediator, a gray-haired woman who'd clearly seen more circus acts than a county fair judge, started us off. "We're here to discuss financial arrangements and potential settlement terms. Mrs. Miller, you're requesting alimony due to financial hardship." Tessa nodded solemnly, as if she hadn't just clacked in on $1,000 shoes. "Yes, Jake has controlled the finances for years. I have nothing. I'm struggling just to survive." Denise didn't even look up yet. She waited, patient as a hawk, until the mediator asked if she had anything to present. That's when the fun began. "Financial hardship?" Denise said, sliding a glossy stack of receipts across the table. "Louis Vuitton, Saks Fifth Avenue, Sephora, $8, $300 in luxury purchases over the last 3 months. All paid through joint accounts." Tessa blinked, then laughed like she'd been caught with gum in her mouth. "Those were gifts," she said quickly. "My sister helped." Denise flipped to the next page. Bank statements. No deposits from Simone. Only withdrawals. All from Jake's paycheck. The mediator raised her eyebrows. Lawrence cleared his throat, muttering something about context. Tessa shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "And that's not all," Denise continued. She pulled out sworn statements from 3 of my coworkers, all attesting that Tessa had asked them for loans while flaunting new purchases. Then she added Jordan's written testimony, carefully worded, about her late-night texts and attempts to drag his name through the mud. The stack of evidence grew taller. Tessa's composure grew thinner. She slammed her manicured nails on the table. "You think this proves anything? This is harassment. I deserve compensation for pain and suffering." The mediator leaned back, unimpressed. "Mrs. Miller, the court deals in documentation, not dramatics. Right now, the documentation paints a very different picture than what you're describing." Her face flushed crimson. She turned on Lawrence. "Do something." But Lawrence had already seen the writing on the wall. He held up his palms. "Tessa, the evidence is strong. We might need to consider negotiating a clean split. No alimony, no further claims." She recoiled like he'd slapped her. "No, I'm not walking away with nothing. I've given years to this marriage. I sacrificed." I finally spoke, calm and steady. "Sacrificed what? You wanted vacations. I bought tires to keep us safe. You wanted handbags. I paid bills. You wanted Chris. I stayed faithful. Don't stand here and talk about sacrifice when the only thing you gave was excuses." The mediator tapped her pen, signaling the session was over. "We'll document the failed negotiation and proceed accordingly." Tessa stood, her heels scraping against the carpet. She tried to muster dignity, but it came out as a hiss. "This isn't over, Jake. I'll make sure everyone sees what kind of man you really are." I gathered my papers, slid them neatly into Denise's folder, and looked her square in the eye. "They already do." Her rage couldn't fill the silence that followed. The truth had the floor now, and no designer label in the world could cover it. By the time mediation fell apart, Tessa's desperation had sharpened into something reckless. When crocodile tears stopped working and receipts stacked higher than her excuses, she reached for the only weapon she thought she still had: my property. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind of day I normally would have spent tightening bolts on the truck or sanding a piece of oak in the garage, when I spotted her in the driveway. She wasn't alone. A stranger's pickup idled by the curb, tailgate down. And there she was, half hidden behind the garage door, struggling to drag out my old Martin guitar case. The one I'd saved 3 months of paychecks for back in my 20s. The one I swore I'd pass down someday. I stepped outside slowly, boots heavy on the pavement. What do you think you're doing? She flinched, but only for a second. It's communal property, she snapped, shoving the case toward the truck. I'm selling it. We need the money. I pulled my phone out, not to record for later, but to dial right then and there. Funny thing, I said, raising it so she could see. I kept every receipt, including the one with my name on this guitar. Paid in full years before we ever said vows. Her eyes darted to the driver, some guy shifting uncomfortably, clearly realizing he'd stepped into a mess he didn't want to touch. Ma'am, he said carefully, maybe I should. Go, I told him, before you end up in a police report. He didn't argue. He climbed back into the truck and peeled off, leaving Tessa standing there with her hands still on what wasn't hers. The patrol car showed up 15 minutes later. 2 officers. I handed them the receipt, neat and folded, like I'd been waiting for this moment my whole life. They looked it over, nodded, and gave her the kind of warning that leaves a mark deeper than handcuffs. Next time, ma'am, it's theft. Don't test it. She tried to spin it even then. Tears, trembling voices muttering about being trapped, about needing survival money. But the officers weren't buying it. They left, and the silence afterward felt like a verdict. That night, I heard her in the guest room, whispering into her phone. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the words carried. Chris's name. Her voice was soft, pleading. Please, just talk to me. I know Bella doesn't understand you the way I do. We had something real once. Don't you remember? Can wait. I'll make it work this time. I sat on the couch in the dark, the glow of the streetlight painting her silhouette through the cracked door. Her begging wasn't for money this time. It was for a fantasy already buried. Chris was married, moving forward, but Tessa clung to the illusion like a drowning woman hugging an anchor. I didn't barge in, didn't rip the phone from her hand or shout the way some men might. I just let the truth soak into me, steady and cold. She wasn't fighting for our marriage anymore. She wasn't even fighting for herself. She was chasing ghosts. When she finally hung up, her muffled sobs filled the room. But to me, they sounded less like grief and more like the sound of a door finally locking shut. That was the night I knew. She'd already lost this fight. Not because I destroyed her, but because she destroyed herself. All I had to do was stand tall, steady, and let her lies collapse under their own weight. The courthouse smelled like disinfectant and stale air, the kind of place where people drag in their last hopes and leave with paper they didn't want. I sat at the petitioner's table with Denise, my lawyer, calm as a man who knows the lumber is straight and the saw is sharp. Across from us, Tessa looked like she was auditioning for sympathy. Loose blouse, pale makeup, hair pulled back to look humble, but her eyes betrayed her, wild, darting, desperate. Her lawyer, Lawrence, had that haunted look again. He knew what was coming. He'd read the file Denise submitted. He just didn't know what new stunt Tessa had rehearsed for this morning. The judge, a weary man in his 60s with a voice like gravel on asphalt, shuffled papers. We're here to finalize the division of assets in Miller versus Miller. Mrs. Miller, your counsel claims you have new evidence. Tessa stood, clutching her purse like a prop. Yes, Your Honor. I recently discovered I'm pregnant. That changes everything. The room shifted. Even Denise raised an eyebrow. The judge sighed, rubbing his temple. Do you have proof? Tessa pulled a plastic stick from her purse, sealed in a clear zip bag. She held it up like it was Exhibit A in a murder trial. Positive. Denise didn't flinch. Your Honor, with respect, anyone can purchase a test and wave it around. We request medical documentation. The judge nodded. Agreed. Mrs. Miller, do you have official verification? Silence. Tessa's lips trembled, but no paper appeared. She tried to bluff. I didn't have time to schedule the appointment yet. Denise leaned forward. Funny, because my client received screenshots last night. Messages Tessa sent to her ex, Chris, begging for another chance, talking about their future. That was at midnight. If she's pregnant, the timeline doesn't add up, does it? I kept my face steady, though inside, A small ember of satisfaction glowed. Controlled anger doesn't need volume. It needs precision. The judge leaned back, unimpressed. Mrs. Miller, without medical proof, your claim is inadmissible. Frankly, I consider this a stunt. Let's proceed. Lawrence groaned, rubbing his forehead. Tessa collapsed into her chair, glaring at me like I'd stolen her last lifeline. The rest was simple math. Denise walked the judge through the assets. My premarital property, protected. My retirement accounts, untouched. The debts she racked up, traced cleanly to her own name. When the judge finally spoke, it was with the kind of finality that leaves no appeal. Divorce granted. Assets remain separate. Mrs. Miller, you are responsible for the damages and costs associated with your actions. This court will not reward deception. The gavel hit. Done. But Tessa wasn't finished. Out in the hallway, she exploded like a firework nobody wanted to light. You ruined my life, she screamed, heels clicking on marble as she stormed after me. You turned everyone against me. My own parents. My sister. You think you won, Jake? You'll never be happy. You'll regret this. Her voice echoed off the walls, drawing stares from strangers filing past. I stopped, turned, and met her fury with steady eyes. No, I said evenly. The only thing I regret is giving you years you didn't respect. That's not on me anymore. That's on you. Behind her, her parents stood frozen. Her mother wouldn't meet her eyes. Her father, Frank, shook his head slowly, like a man who'd already buried his disappointment too deep to dig up again. Tessa, he said, voice low but clear enough for everyone to hear. You made this bed. Don't ask us to lie in it with you. She gaped at him, betrayed, but he turned away. That was the nail in the coffin. Not my words, not Denise's arguments, not the judge's gavel. Her own father had closed the book. I walked out into the sunlight, the courthouse doors heavy behind me. The weight I'd carried for months, years, really lifted like a beam finally set on solid foundation. The anger that had fueled me didn't burn anymore. It steadied, cooled, hardened into something stronger. She had tried every play in the book. Pity, lies, theft, fantasy. And in the end, the only thing she'd built was her own collapse. The courthouse steps felt like a stage, and Tessa didn't realize the curtain had already fallen. She stormed out behind me, still spitting venom, but she wasn't my problem anymore. The problem was that she still thought there was an audience waiting to applaud her performance. Except this time, the audience wasn't hers. At the bottom of the steps stood Jordan and his girlfriend, Destiny, 7 months pregnant, her hand resting on her belly like a shield. Beside them was Bella, calm as ever, arms crossed. And standing a few feet away, Chris himself, wedding band catching the sun, his new wife hovering just behind him. It was like fate had gathered every name she'd ever tried to twist into her script, all in one place, waiting for the final act. Tessa froze, then passed on a smile. Chris, she started, voice soft, almost girlish. Chris cut her off cold. Don't. His tone was flat steel. My wife doesn't deserve this circus. Bella doesn't either. You need to stop. Her face crumpled for a heartbeat, then snapped back to defiance. She spun toward Bella. You poisoned him against me. He loved me once. Bella didn't flinch. No, Tessa. He outgrew you. Big difference. Jordan stepped forward next, phone in hand. You told people I chased you, that I harassed you. You almost wrecked my marriage twice. Here's the proof of who chased who. He held up the screen with her old messages glowing bright in the sunlight. Destiny's eyes never left Tessa, steady and tired, like a woman who knew exactly what kind of storm her man had dodged. Tessa's words tangled in her throat. She turned to her mother, then her father, searching for backup. But they just stared at her, blank, hollow. Frank's arms were crossed, his jaw locked. Her mother's eyes watered, but she shook her head. No rescue. Not anymore. You can't all turn on me, Tessa said, her voice rising, frantic now. You don't understand. I was trapped. I finally stepped closer, not raising my voice, not gloating, just steady. No, you weren't trapped. You were bored. You wanted shiny things, old flames, attention. You thought you could play victim forever. But the curtain's down, Tessa. Everyone here's seen the script. The crowd that had gathered on the sidewalk, strangers, courthouse regulars, watched her crumble. For once, I didn't feel the need to twist the knife. I didn't even feel anger anymore. Just clarity. She sank onto the steps, head in her hands, mumbling something about nobody loving her. But nobody rushed to comfort her. Not Chris, not Bella, not Jordan or Destiny, not even her own parents. I turned to leave. Chris caught my eye as I passed. He gave a short nod, respect, not camaraderie. Bella looked relieved, Jordan grateful. Destiny smiled faintly, as if to say, you handled this the way a man should. And me? I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Because sometimes strength isn't about winning the loudest fight. Sometimes it's about standing tall while the liar's voice finally cracks and breaks on its own. I walked to my truck, slid the key in, and pulled out into the sunlit street, leaving Tessa behind with the only thing she had left, the echo of her own lies. The weeks after the court hearing felt quieter than I'd imagined. Not empty, just quiet like a construction site after the tools are packed away and the frame finally stands on its own. For the first time in years, I could breathe without waiting for the next fight, the next accusation, the next storm of drama she carried in like perfume. I didn't jump into distractions. I didn't bury myself in work until I broke, and I didn't drown in whiskey like some men might. I went to therapy, just once a week, sitting across from a woman with glasses and a notebook who asked me questions I'd never bothered to answer for myself. Why did I put up with it for so long? Why did I swallow my anger until it curdled? The sessions weren't easy, but they felt honest. And that honesty cut deeper than any lie Tessa ever threw at me. I joined a hiking group, too. Nothing fancy. Just a handful of people who met on Saturday mornings, boots laced, thermoses filled, heading out into the woods. Out there, climbing ridges and hearing my own breath echo in the trees, I remembered something I'd forgotten. I liked being alive, not surviving, living. And yeah, I started dating again. Cautious, slow. No grand gestures or whirlwind romances. Just coffee with a woman who liked dogs and country music. Dinner with another who taught high school history and laughed too loud at her own jokes. It wasn't about finding someone to fill a hole. It was about proving to myself that I wasn't broken, just bruised. Every once in a while, I'd hear about Tessa. Word got around she'd lost her job after her lies about coworkers unraveled. Her parents stopped covering for her. Simone kept her distance. Chris and Bella had moved on with their marriage, Jordan and Destiny had their baby, and the world had no stage left for Tessa to perform on. She'd burned every bridge, and she was standing in the ashes alone. There was irony in that. If she had just told me the truth from the start, if she'd admitted she wasn't happy, that she wanted a different life, we could have split clean. No court, no humiliation, no witnesses lined up to expose her. She could have walked away with dignity. Instead, she chose lies and theatrics, and those things never hold weight when the judge calls for proof. As for me, I gained more than I lost. I gained clarity, peace, freedom. I learned that controlled anger, when you don't let it rot into bitterness, can be the sharpest tool in a man's kit. It can keep you steady when the ground shakes, decisive when lies fly, unbroken when someone tries to shatter you. One evening, I sat on the porch with a glass of bourbon, watching the sun drop behind the trees, and it hit me plain as day. I wasn't the man she called less than. I was the man who walked through the fire she set and came out stronger on the other side. And that was enough. More than enough. Because sometimes victory isn't about crushing the other person. It's about walking away with your head high, your dignity intact, and your life finally, blessedly, your own.
Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters. And trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.